Welcome to this edition of Diligence Inside America's Boardrooms. I'm TK Kerstetter, and I'll be your host for today's show. Today, we're going to be talking about what directors should know about cloud computing. And joining me is someone who considers themselves an expert in this area. Please welcome Caroline Tsay, who's a board member with Coca-Cola and Morningstar, Inc., and she's also the CEO of Compute Software. So welcome, Caroline.
Thank you so much, TK, for having me. It's always great to be here.
We go back a ways, and it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. So before we get started, I know what Coca-Cola is. I know what Morningstar is. I'm not sure that I know completely what Compute Software is. So can you tell our audience what Compute Software is?
I'd be happy to. So Compute Software is a company that I had founded back in 2017. We're a cloud software company based in Silicon Valley. We help companies running on the public cloud, whether that's Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, or even Google Cloud, to maximize the value that they're getting in the cloud. So that includes, getting maximum savings, increasing productivity, as well as performance of the workloads and the applications that are being run on the cloud.
Well, then, as I said, you are probably the perfect person to deal with this question. And I think this is a very legitimate question. I'm not sure. I mean, I like to think of myself as pretty educated in this board space and governance space, but the cloud still raises questions in my mind, as it does a lot of directors. So maybe we better start by, and I know this is probably tough to do to define it, but can you sort of give a context of what the cloud is and cloud computing is?
Sure. Yeah, it sounds amorphous, but it basically means a set of servers, storage, or other types of services available that's running somewhere else, potentially with a third party like an AWS, Google Cloud, or Azure, and you being able to access those through the internet. So these include applications or any other kinds of online and software-based experiences that you can get access to by running on those services that include compute and storage and other capabilities somewhere else.
And I assume this just expands significantly one's abilities to be digital just by the simple fact of its space and its storage and its capabilities. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, if you're going to go with one of the major cloud providers today, including the ones that I mentioned, you're going to get scalability simply because they are heavily investing in those areas, supporting and managing it for many different customers of theirs. And also, quite frankly, they've got the talent and knowledge to stay on top of that and address issues around compliance, security, having these be in many different locations so they're accessible wherever you are in the world. So definitely significant advantages and benefits for being there.
So I'll put myself in the category to know enough about that to be sort of dangerous, but let's look at it a little more strategically on why that becomes such a key strategy for companies, which it sort of makes sense, okay, from your description. But maybe more importantly, why board members need to understand, the capabilities of the cloud and cloud computing.
Yeah. So the cloud's role is typically to reshape the competitive posture of a business. There was actually this McKinsey study back in April of this year that interviewed about 40 different boards. And apparently only 13% are actively thinking about or engaging about the cloud. And when you think about that, it's generally because it's viewed as just an infrastructure topic that the management team would go and really drive and focus on. At most, you might see a sentence, right, or a line item in the audit committee materials or the board materials about it. But generally, and in part because of COVID-19, consumers are engaging even more digitally now. I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. And also remote and virtual work has a big play in the use of these services and capabilities offered in the cloud. So there's this question of whether the cloud can help acceleration and transformation for a company to keep up with its competition and satisfy its customers and consumers.
And the more we have digital transformation, the more directors do need to understand. So if there's people out there that do not understand the cloud, okay, I think it sounds imperative on their part to become more familiar with how important that is to their company's future.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's absolutely right. I would say that the directors today really need to engage at a far deeper level, because again, it concerns the competition and how far they can go to address that against their peers. So there are lots of questions to be asking around this. I'm happy to talk about what are kind of the key topics or areas that board directors should be engaging on.
Well, that sounds perfect. Why don't you sort of cover what kind of questions that corporate directors should be asking their management team to better understand and get their arms around one's sort of cloud strategy and sort of key tactics that come out of that?
Yeah, I would say there are probably 5 buckets of areas to really engage on. One is, how do you measure the business value that you would expect to get from using the cloud? Right. So generally, the cloud offers all these benefits around scalability, cost effectiveness, ease of management, all these things to be able to provide digital services to your customers. But at the end of the day, what are you truly going for, and how does that play into the strategy of the company? Right. So in the case of companies that are maybe just starting to think about that and are running their own data centers today, which can be very expensive and capital intensive, how quickly do you want to look at migrating to the cloud and optimizing the speed to get there? Right. So that's got to align with the strategy and direction for the business. Number 2 is the talent. Right? If you're going to be in the cloud, you very well may need cloud native talent. People with the skill sets and experiences born from using cloud services, because it's just a very different mindset and shift in how you do things. Work in what we call the on-premise world, the world in which you're managing your own data centers and computing needs, versus giving that over to the cloud and having somebody else manage it. Another aspect of this is budget and capital allocation, and how you would treat your investments and expenses. So moving to the cloud is going to change the operating model and the culture in which you would think about how you would manage the accounting, the finances, and your investment allocations around it, right? Because you're moving from CapEx to an OpEx model. And then I would say two other kind of key questions that board directors should be asking include sustainability and the carbon footprint, right? So using the cloud requires quite a bit of power, electricity consumption. And, if companies do care about sustainability and their emissions, how what's the size of the role and the footprint of the cloud in that? And then one big one that's been coming up, even within my own boards that we talk about, is security. Do you have the ability to be in a much better position with regard to security of your applications, of your environments that you're using within the company by being a part of the cloud? Right. So I think those are areas that are really important for board directors to be questioning of the management team and helping them understand all these areas and topics.
Well, Caroline, I always have the opportunity to learn something when I have a chance to interact with you. You taught me what digital natives were, and since then I've just blossomed as a knowledgeable person in the digital transformation space. But I always appreciate when you take the time to come on and explain the future of business and of the boardroom. And I really appreciate it this time for you taking the time to join us.
Thank you so much. Happy to be here and always excited to be talking with you about these topics, TK.
Okay, so that will conclude this edition of Inside America's Boardrooms. We hope you enjoyed the show. We'll be back again next week when we take another look at a critical topic that'll help you be a better board member or committee member. So we'll see you then.